a hypothesis map is what you would want to essentially start off with, wherein you are saying that I'm going to look at a particular landscape of the market, right? And for that particular market, I will want to have my own product offering, and I would want to see. I will put in a hypothesis saying that what is that I would want to prove in here to establish the product market.
So hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Minimum Viable Podcast, a podcast series brought to you by PM School. I am Ankit, one of the co-founders of PM School, and I co-host this along with Nikunj, who's also a co-founder and good friend of mine. Today on the podcast, we have a very special guest. We have Narayan VS joining us from Whatfix. He's a product leader with more than 15 years of product management experience. Interestingly, both of us share the same boss. My ex-boss is his current boss. Current manager, if I'm correct, Narayan. And Narayan, great having you on the podcast. Talk to us about what you're up to at Whatfix and a bit of your background of what led you to your current role.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I am, as you mentioned, I am a lead PM within the Whatfix. I take care of a couple of new product initiatives within Whatfix. One of them happens to be more as an add-on product, and the other one is more of a new product line in itself, and which is what I am working on, both of them. As such, I have over 20 plus years of product industry experience, of which 15 plus I have been in product management roles across large enterprises, startups. And I also have run my own entrepreneurship stint. Where I was having my own firm, also in a SaaS kind of a setup. And over COVID turbulent times, I had to move back into the industry, and that's what led me essentially into. And I saw that there was this new opportunity for me to continue to work on a new product initiative, which is actually pretty interesting in itself. And that essentially what took me here into Whatfix. And I'm here in Whatfix close to a year and a half now. And that's what is going on.
Well, awesome. Nikunj, we were just discussing before the podcast how Saurabh, who was my ex-boss and currently leads the product at Whatfix, is a great manager, right? So, yeah.
Fantastic. Yes, indeed.
Glad to hear. You need someone really patient, especially in 0 to 1.
Yes, indeed. That's very true.
All right. So talking about 0 to 1, as you've been leading multiple 0 to 1 initiatives is what at least Ankit told me. And these initiatives are kind of now destined to bring multi-million ARR, right? Can you talk to us about frameworks you refer to while building these? See, essentially 0 to 1 is a very ambiguous territory. Obviously, product management in general is very ambiguous, but how do you decide priorities? How do you decide what to build and the why, right? Can you just take us across maybe an example wherein you were struggling to figure A and B and you decided basis your chain of thought?
Yeah, a great question. The key part that you rightly mentioned there is all about its ambiguity, right? The whole journey of 0 to 1 is all about ambiguity, right? Before I just talk about some of the frameworks and mental models, I would also want to just clarify what is a 0 to 1 kind of a build, right? It could essentially be you are building a product which is in a new category, right? That's one option. Or you probably are going to be segmenting an existing category, right? That would be one of the two choices that you are doing. Now, as a PM, right? If you are going to do a 0 to 1, there is one of the two options in front of you. Either you are part of a founding team, right? In which case you are actually part of the journey, or you are part of a new product team, right? These are already existing, I can say, well-established firms, and they have a primary first product which is already launched, done, and it is multi-million, it is growing, and I can say fabulous. Now they need to start looking for additional revenue streams, and that is when you will start doing new products. And if you are going to be a PM, essentially part of that team, that is when you stand to see, right? More or less, in all other instances, you are mostly doing a one-to-one kind of a thing. You're doing more of a scale and not necessarily 0 to 1 kind of thing, unless you are a founder kind of thing where you are essentially. So that's kind of like the base that I want to just make sure that we understand what a 0 to 1 is. Now, before I talk of some framework, I also would want to touch upon that ambiguity part, and one of the mental model that I generally use, especially for a 0 to 1 is all about finding what typically with multiple definitions we have seen the product market fit, right? So that's typically what people keep referring with various definitions of what the product market fit is. But the way I try to see from a mental model standpoint is a product market fit. By definition, if you see there is a fit out there, right? I just try to see it more as a jigsaw puzzle, right? A puzzle, but it is something which has like hundreds or maybe even thousands of pieces. And the strange part in there is like not all the pieces are going to be fitting in, and you will have to figure out what is going to be that fit that really works, right? So the problem here is not about just put a goal, try to go and reach here. The problem is more of a search and selection kind of a problem. Right? Then the mental model is you're trying to search and select, and that is where the ambiguity that you touched upon comes in, right? Because you could very well keep executing and you could very well keep hitting all kind of your targets, but if you are not able to find the right kind of a combinatorial thing, right? The product which fits a particular market, a segment, you simply are not going to find that holy grail of product market fit, right? That's the mental model, right? There's just that. So what would help, let me just kind of also mention the framework that I use is, now, if you are doing a search, obviously you would need some kind of a, like, even if you're going to search out, maybe you are doing some discovery, you're just going on some journey, you need some map, right? And that's something that I use as a framework. Like I typically more kind of refer to as a hypothesis map, right? A hypothesis map is what you would want to essentially start off with, wherein you are saying that I'm going to look at a particular landscape of the market, right? And for that particular market, I will want to have my own product offering, and I would want to see, I will put in a hypothesis saying that what is that I would want to prove in here to establish the product market. Now, when I talk about the market part, there are going to be 3 or 4 components to it, right? One, you would want to, now multiple people, you can say, have given various definitions for this one. The 3 or 4 things that I consider as vital is, right, you would want to start off with who are your audience, right? The persona, a ICP kind of a thing, if you would want to call it as. And then you would want to look at what are the needs, like the jobs to be kind of done kind of a thing, right? What is their need? Like, what are the problems? What are the specific things for that particular persona, right? That's the second part. And then you would also want to look at key important thing is like, what are the current alternatives, right? What is that they are doing today to essentially address that particular need or the problem? Right? How are they doing? If they are doing nothing about it, probably that's not even a problem for them, right? That's a very important thing. And the fourth one, the more important that I have essentially come to understand is why now, right? Why would they want to solve that problem? And in any manner now, of all things that they have, why would they want to solve that? Now, that's the market side of the story. Now, you would want to, against that need or the reality of what the market is, you would want to say that, okay, here is my solution for this particular problem on those alternatives, which I believe is better or different from the existing alternatives, and how. Unless you are not able to really put across this, and that becomes your hypothesis, right? The hypothesis map is all about, you're saying my solution that I am putting out in here, and it's not in vacuum, in comparison to the existing alternatives, is different and better in those lines and those particular ways. And that's the hypothesis, what you are going to, so the whole puzzle now is about this. You are trying to now figure out for whom. So you are not really saying that I'll just go about find maybe like 3 or 5 people. If they are just kind of happy about what I'm saying, maybe I get started with them, and that's not the problem, the point, right? The biggest problem is that your selection bias, right? You just go and find some people, you just start talking to them, and if they kind of, because they want to be kind of more nice to you, they just say, okay, let me get started with you, let me just, and that's the biggest problem, the biggest challenge, like you would want to now start doing more of a search and selection thing, right? Who among my audience, who among the persona that I am speaking to fits to this hypothesis? And it is all about you are eliminating host of people and then trying to fit who are going to be the one. So broadly speaking, like I did talked about few set of things in here, just coming back to the aspect that the key thing that we will have to keep in mind here is that it is a search and selection problem. And you're not just picking anybody and anyone who comes in your way saying that, yeah, I'm interested, let's get started. It's all about vetting and validating to see who will fit to your particular solution and what their needs are, and figuring out. And that journey is what a 0 to 1 journey is all about, right? That's the mental model, like the framework that I generally refer to, and it has I can say been a good one so far for me.
Well,
so, Narayan, from your experience, maybe can you give can you give more context on this framework where you've used, in solving an actual product management problem, right? Like from your experience at probably Whatfix, building 0 to 1, or in your prior as being an entrepreneur, right?
I would actually do both, right? I would want to mention something that I have done in the past, and where in fact this sense of why these things become important comes because I have done this in the past where it has not worked, and my introspection of why hasn't not worked, and then apply it in when I am just doing it in Whatfix, and how applying those things have made it any better, right? So I was part of this entrepreneurial journey where we were doing SaaS for hospitality, right? And we started off with, like many other folks, I come from a product management more in consumer electronics, right? I worked in Nokia, Logitech, Philips, kind of a background where I was product managers. And that's the background that I come in. But now when I start my journey as an entrepreneur, and we started doing this B2B SaaS in hospitality, the very naive way of we getting started there was like, we just said, it is probably a de facto that I would want to get started with India as a marketplace, right? India as the segment that we go about. And then we don't even question that particular decision point that India is the market. You just start doing because if you listen to many of the thoughts, you can say, or even the thought leaders who are expressing in Valley, right? They are pretty much not so much when you talk about a product management kind of a framework, they don't talk so much about the market part. Because in a US kind of a thing, you slice and dice whichever way the market is reasonably big. You can still go about it, and there is a defined maturity curve for them to use, adopt, and just grow. But that's not the case in an Indian kind of a context. The reason why I'm saying is that starting to identify the selection part becomes so important in here, because we pretty much didn't even give a thought to saying that, is this the one that we want to even go about the Indian market? Without that, we just said okay, we start building, iterating. Okay? You just go identify a set of folks who are going to be the ones who you potentially think are your customers, start speaking to them, and then identify what their problems are, what the alternatives is. You start going about doing this, right? Now, what we saw in there was you would probably know this term like local maxima versus a global maxima, right?
Yes.
You start, you can say, interacting with a bunch of people that you are interacting, and then you believe those are the right kind of audience that you should go about, and then start solving for them. Now, eventually, what starts happening is that you start figuring out that probably you are just not climbing the right hill, right? Is that the one that you wanted to even climb? In itself becomes a question mark. Now, that's what happened in our journey. We eventually figured out the market that we were looking at as an India market was not mature enough for offering something like us, right? You could really build a solution which is super, you can say, well-defined, and it's great. But if the need itself is not very evident and you can say very clear for them so that they can go ahead and even make a purchasing decision around it, was just not even there. Now, you are kind of after a few cycles of iteration, then you figure out that probably it is not just about just solving the iterative part of the product, which is what many of the folks in the value would keep talking about, the design iterations and the aspects, those aspects, but to start off with the right market as well. And that is what essentially, so that's kind of where we, at least I started giving more priority and importance towards the aspect of picking the right, as opposed to just kind of say, like, you go about anybody who nods a head at you and then say, like, yeah, I'm interested. You just go and start solving for them. That's going to be a big challenge, right? That's one clear learning that I picked up from my entrepreneurial journey. And then now in Whatfix, when I can say I have been working on a couple of products, the one which is more of a new product line, it has been very, very clear that you pick the right kind of, I'll be talking later also about this design partnership. Finding the right kind of design partners becomes so much important, right? Because they are going to be, if the hypothesis map is the one which is giving you a plan, the design partners are the ones who are giving you the compass, right? They are the ones who are going to guide you towards the product market fit. That's the way I try to see it. So picking the right kind of design partner become a very conscious choice that I started making. If I were not to have had this kind of a framework, if I had not done that, my entrepreneurial journey in the past, it would be like you are just kind of anybody, especially in a large, if you're working with large enterprise kind of a scenario, anyone who comes up and then says, like, yeah, I'm interested, like that big logo in itself will be an enticing thing that, yeah, maybe I should go. I just start working with them. And whatever they say, maybe I should just start. But you have to be extra careful in there, that because those selection of those design partners, and that's where I'm again talking about the selection problem. It's not just about they're saying, like, I build anything and it's for anybody. The selection of design partners becomes so much important, right? That's kind of like briefly back to the question that you are asking about, I can say what without and with this kind of a framework. That's one specific place I can very clearly see the difference of having that framework and making those choices more in a, not like just because it happened I picked up, but something that you're very much thoughtful about is a key thing. It starts off very much, I can say, on the design partnership in itself, right? That's something that I would.
Got it. So even before coming to a design partners question, right, I have a follow-up to this, right? You are leading a team. You're leading a team at Whatfix. It's a 0 to 1 team where things could be very chaotic, right? And you have a sense of how things should go, right? So how do you internalize this process in your team, right? It must be very difficult, I'm assuming.
Certainly, right? So, and that is where having a framework, right? And also a sense of not bringing in too many things onto your plate, right? Because especially a 0 to 1 is all about clarifying and clarity, right? What you have 100 things always on your plate, but you will have to pick that one thing, right? If there is going to be that one thing that you will have to and keep your focus and execute, and that's going to be more like a if you are unable to do that, it's pretty much like a live or die kind of a choice.
Absolutely.
Right? If you are unable to pick that one single thing and then be able to focus, that's going to be a big thing. So as a PM, right, in that kind of a situation, the most important thing is, like, to me, the way I see is like whether it's 0 to 1 or even 1 to n kind of a offering. One of the most important thing a PM brings to any particular team is clarity. If there is one thing that they will do, it has to be bringing in clarity. And when I say clarity, it is clarity about what the customer, who the customer is, what their needs are, what their problems are, what their alternatives are. Right? That's the clarity. Like you, if we look at the triad of the product, the design, and the engineering, you bring in that customer. Like time and again, we have seen this, right? The PM is the one who brings in the voice of the customer into the team, right? So you are bringing that clarity. You are bringing the clarity of the problem. And it is not just about one single problem just there. Like you are bringing the clarity of this problem has a context, and why is that important in the larger aspect of you building a product to it, right? You're talking not about n equal to 1, like this product is not just solving one particular person's problem, but to a market. Being able to clarify that the design partners you have and how does it map it to the larger market is the primary thing that you bring in back to the team. So the question that you were asking about how to essentially go about, because it is a uncertainty, right? All about uncertainty. Bringing in the clarity of the market, the customer, and their problems and the alternatives, which is the hypothesis map that I talked about. Bringing that and constructing that and presenting it back to the team is going to be, and that creating that picture and essentially saying, because of this, we start focusing on this one thing and not 100 other things that you can very well take it, like in all possible directions. Because given a choice, the engineering folks would always want to keep building more and more, and the infrastructure, maybe something about the design folks would want to do all nice, you can say designs, all of that, but you will have to still keep bringing back the focus and the attention to that problem, that one single thing. And that is what, while this might be true for any PM, any function in any one to, you can say, a growth aspect as well, but this becomes super critical and important for a 0 to 1 kind of a situation.
Just one more question before we move on to the next one, right? Like, what are the internal processes you have set for that? For example, Amazon has that famous PR FAQ policy, right? That anyone who comes up, every PM has to come up with a PR FAQ, and that essentially solves for, you know, the kind of framework which you said. So what are the, let's say, the best practices which you guys are following at Whatfix? Let's say I'm a product manager who says that, you know, I'm the voice of the customer. I say that this is the pain point which we need to solve for that. Then how do you go about it as a process, right?
Okay. So the whole thing is, again, this is not something that something we are uniquely following, right? This is like pretty widely being used across the industry. Like, at least in case of a 0 to 1 kind of a journey, there is like post GA and pre GA. Like, that's how I would say general availability. The post general availability, the situation is going to be very different versus what you do before it goes GA. So it goes through multiple stages. You start off with something which is going to be more from a design, I can say, thinking standpoint. It's more like iterative design, right? That's the primary thing that we look at. And each stage of the iteration, you are starting with a very low fidelity and progressively, you can say, moving to a higher fidelity of whether that's going to be the needs, clarifying the needs from a customer standpoint, or from the product, its evolution itself, right? You would want to initially start off with something which is going to be extremely low on fidelity, as much as like you're just building some kind of a Figma prototypes, right? That's how you start off with. And then you're just like doing a show and tell kind of a thing, right? There is nothing available there, but you are trying to show and tell using those prototypes. And then you're just trying to get, okay, this is what I can say we would want to put in front of you, the customer. So we have also this mechanism, what we call as like a design partnership. Like, that's something that we can talk on in detail. Like, as part of that whole thing, we just keep working with our design partners on an iterative basis. So it start off with a low fidelity MVP, and that's what we would start off with. And then we would want to move that MVP towards something which is going to be V1. And in that process, we are going to be iteratively clarifying what is the need and how much of that solution that you would want to build to essentially get to that MVP, the minimum viable part, right? The bare minimum thing, which is going to satisfy sufficiently that particular need that they are expressing now when compared to the alternatives. I will always keep referring back to the alternatives, because for the customer, they are always having the reference of, what am I doing today? And what you are offering as a solution, is this any better, any different? I would always want to keep comparing. That's how they see the world as, right? So you would want to keep creating something which is going to be in comparison to those alternatives, bare minimum, which can satisfy that need better than what the alternatives are. And that's so there are a few stages that we take it through, a very low fidelity show and tell kind of a thing, all the way till MVP and the first version, which is going to the beta, and then progressively you move it towards the GA. That's kind of a very standard process, and we believe that's a fairly good one that we follow taking it through.
Just a follow-up question on this. So you said GA, or the general availability. I'm assuming general availability in other terms also go to market, right? So let's say you are or is it different in your case?
Okay, so go to market is certainly something which is close to the GA, right? But we do have something even before we do a GA, we have the design partners, right? Again, that we were talking about. And those are the ones that like they are going to be there. So we have customers constantly in there. So at some point in time, when we are more going towards the GA, we do bring in customer facing functions, right? Start working with the team, wherein it is going to be someone who is a marketing person who is trying to more of a product marketing kind of a thing, who starts creating these kind of a scalable collaterals and everything that can do for the GTM. And also somebody, if it is going to be like, because I am currently in the Whatfix, we are doing it more like a additional product line. The GTM looks very different. But if you are doing more like you are an entrepreneur doing it more from the scratch, your GTM would be looking very different in that case, right? You are going to start bringing in someone who is more of a SDR or a BDR kind of with them, who starts doing those kind of a reach out. Now you have some kind of a basic playbook of what the problem is looking like and what your solution is. And then you start looking at some patterns and then start reaching out to folks who are very similar to that particular use case and a need. And you start putting your pipeline to say that maybe you want to start doing that reach out activity.
Understood.
That would be it.
Narayan, I like how you obviously explained the process, iteration, working closely with your clients, design partners, but just zooming out, right? Whatfix is at a certain stage, even though you are building 0 to 1 product, the multiple clients you already have. You are at like a 1 level, even though you might be introducing a new product, you have a set of partners, right? And then conflicting priorities, like you did talk about an ICP or certain sort of customer persona. I'm pretty sure with like upwards of like, I think if I'm right, like upwards of 300 CR annual revenue, you would have a mix of different types of ICPs, like different user customer personas. How do you like prioritize? And like, I'll also share an anecdote. Recently, I was listening to this episode from Lenny's podcast, wherein Anuj Rathi, one of the product leaders in India, talks about when you look at a roadmap at a 50,000 feet, you have to look at a roadmap being split across like 4 different sort of buckets, right? And he had this framework called 4 BVs. That is, one bucket is your big bets that you are essentially trying to build. One bucket is tech debts. Like even though you're building 0 to 1, you're trying to sort of carve out a existing component, and there could be certain tech debts and dependencies. And one bucket could be sort of, let's say, like context of certain improvements that you might want to build to the base. So do you look at like your roadmap and plan in a certain way? Hey, there are 10 things we want to build, but it should be split in percentages. My big bet should be X percentages, and like my optimization should be Y. How do you go about planning your roadmap?
Okay, great question. Like that framework that you mentioned, I think there are variants of that particular the 60-30-10 kind of a variation. There have been multiple ones that, to an extent, I would see more is applicable at a product portfolio kind of at that level. But when you are looking within a specific product, especially something which is going from 0 to 1 kind of a thing, and especially if you are talking again pre-GA, right, post-GA, and when you're starting to scale this, like it is going to be a much different beast altogether. But before you even get your, let's say, first 10 customers, right, it is going to be super important that you are not kind of getting distracted. Right? That's the most important thing. You will want to keep bringing back. I talked about it earlier also. Focus is the one thing that you would want to ensure. So there are obviously going to be like, you would want to pace yourself suitably, that you would not want to, because when you start, I talked about this iterative of low fidelity to higher one. That's true also for the code base as well, right? The product itself is going to evolve. You start off with the product, which is going to be, maybe you are just trying to do a MVP, which is like bare minimum. You are just trying to, and in that case, probably you are bringing in certain components which are not reusable, which are just going to be there, done once, thrown away kind of stuff. That's all going to be in there. Now, that's perfectly okay till you are going to validate your hypothesis, right? It is important at what stage you would want to expand your roadmap to say that I'm also bringing in that additional things of tech debts and incremental things and other aspects. You have to be very careful about it. You do not want to do that too early, And at the same time, you don't want to do it too late as well, right? Because then the moment it starts scaling in, if you don't have the right, you can say, foundation, it's going to be too much of it, because the scaling will stop at some point in time because it's unable to really cater to that kind of demand. Right? So it's a very fine balance in there, especially for something which is going to be 0 to 1. Having said that, the one aspect that I have seen in what we have been doing so far within Whatfix is, especially for the 0-1 kind of a thing, is that you would want to keep the alignment with especially the engineering, design, and the triad. You want to keep that, the communication is going to be critical in there, right? You want to keep saying that we do know this has a particular time and it will be happening, right? And obviously somebody who is more from an engineering standpoint, they are going to keep pushing that, can we essentially start now putting in a more firmer foundation so that we can start seeing. Now, you would want to use all the signals that's coming from your design partners to inform you there, right? That's why I said, like, especially between your first 10 customers, everything that you are going to be doing, I personally believe, has to be tightly driven by what your design partners are indicating. If they are saying that this is what I'm seeing, you would want to demonstrate value from your standpoint to them first and make them as somebody who is referenceable. Now, without that, there is no scaling out there, right? That's going to be the most important. So it is all about getting to that 10 customer base, making them, like, I can say, happy about your, I can say, solution and the alternative. And then from there on, you can look at the roadmap of a traditional one, right? A 60, 30, 10 kind of a thing. But that will have to wait till you reach that particular point.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, Narayan. This brings us to the last question, right? So what is that one question that you ask any PM who interviews for your team?
Okay. So as I mentioned already in there, like, to me, clarity is the single most important thing that I see in any PM, because that's what they bring in to the team. Now, one typical question that I try to, so when we talk about clarity, it is all about synthesizing, right? Synthesizing data and events, right? You could very well keep going through a host of data and host of events. And if you're unable to synthesize and be able to collectively say, what's the learning out of there? You simply will not be able to improve, or you can say, make better decisions, right? That's the whole point. Now, to that extent, one question that I try to, you can say, ask in many of the interviews to understand this aspect is, ask the candidate about a situation, like it's more a situational kind of a question, where they had planned a certain exercise, a project, whatever it would be, and they had seen outcome, but the outcome was not in line with what they had essentially planned and executed. Right? That's great. Okay, so, that does happen many a times. Now, like looking backwards, what is that they essentially are learning out of that, and how are they able to articulate that learning is something that I would be very much interested in. Because if you're going to just keep complaining, or if you're going to be saying that there were 10 other things which were just not working, or you can say this went wrong, something else went wrong, that's more like you're just looking at those as a sequence of events. But the learning is simply not there. The synthesis is not in there. And I would certainly be interested to understand, how do they essentially go about dissecting that, and how are they essentially trying to come out with an observation, which is what they want to capture as the learning going forward. I would definitely be interested, and I do. That's more of a behavioral question, and that's something that I pretty much look forward in many of the candidates.
Awesome. Sounds good, Narayan. Thank you so much for doing this. Means a lot to us at PM School. I hope you had a great time doing this, talking to us.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me. Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you're hiring for PMs in future, feel free to reach out to us. We're just a WhatsApp away, or I'll keep reaching out to you.
Sure. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much.